Have you ever thought to yourself, does my story really matter? I thought that a couple times because I thought maybe, it's not big enough, it's not flashy enough. But from our guest today, we are really going to talk a little bit more about that and how your story does matter through the mundane and the miraculous. Thank you for checking out the Parable Podcast today. I'm your host, Danielle Zapchenk. Today, I sit down with author, advocate, and dog mom, Nikki Tigg, as she shares a funny story that happened to her, but she learned so much.
In life, in the way that I navigate life and choices, it just reminds me that almost right is still wrong. And there's so many times that we're like, oh, well, it's kind of right, and I'm kind of doing this, and kind of can make our own way, but it's not truly where God desires for us to be.
Here's my conversation with Nikki Tigg. Well, Nikki, welcome to the Parable Podcast. I'm so grateful to have you here. We were table mates at a boot camp this past spring, and so I got to know a little bit more about you. So thank you so much for joining me today.
I am super excited to be here.
I do know that a couple things have changed in your life. One, you have a new dog. So tell me, is this your first fur child, or have you had multiple dogs over your life?
Okay, this is my second fur child, but I've not had a puppy in the house since my son was in kindergarten, and now he is a sophomore in college. So I've learned a lot, and my husband and my son keep messing with me. They're like, I think you favor him more than you favored our last dog. I'm like, I'm sorry. There's like 15 years of growth. I don't favor one. I just learn more. So yes, we have a new fur baby. His name is Barkley. He's a Bernedoodle, and he's so cute.
Yeah. Did you have dogs or pets growing up?
I had pets growing up, but it was like outside pets. We didn't really have our pets in the home. So our first dog, she was in the home, and I wanted her. Like, I just really woke up one day and was like, you know what? I want a dog. And then the next day I went and got a dog against my husband's wishes, and I brought a dog home. And I guess our sweet little Bernedoodle is payback, because once our old dog, we had to put her down, our first dog, we had to put her down, and I did not want another dog after that. And it's been 2.5 years. So I just thought we were done, and we're empty nesters. So I was like cruising with that. And then one day my husband said he wanted a dog, and the next day we were picking one out at the breeder. So here we go.
I love how usually, a friend or your spouse is just like, you know what? No, this is not where we're going in life. And then all of a sudden, now there's just a new best friend inside your home. Our kids, during COVID, they came up with this whole presentation. It was lovely. Like, I was so impressed. We did not end up getting a dog because we do need a hypoallergenic dog in this house, but they sure put in the effort. They really did.
So cute, though. That's so sweet.
So you had said your son is a sophomore in college, and you guys are empty nesters. What has that season, just the start of the season, look like for you?
Honestly, really good. In the beginning, it was hard. And I just think in the beginning, meaning literally in August of last year, after we took him to school, we didn't allow him to take his car his first year. And honestly, pulling back onto the street and seeing his car here and him knowing he's in another state, that mama sadness kicked in for sure. But honestly, it did not last that long. I have just try to, pray and ask God to give me the grace to embrace every season of life. And at the end of the day, there are 1,000 other reasons I could be coming home and not having my son here, and him being in college is a good one. Yeah. So I didn't, want to mourn that or just be too sad about it. Of course, we're sad. We miss him, but it's been great. And honestly, my husband, kudos to him, because when my son was a freshman in high school, we started doing like Saturday morning breakfast dates, because he said, you know what, we're at this stage of life where it's going to go by really quickly. Yeah. And I do not want him to leave this house and go to college and we don't know each other. So every Saturday we have taken that day to go have a breakfast date somewhere around town, the next town, wherever. We're in Nashville. So we just go try new places all the time. So that, I think, was preparing us for this empty nest season. And it has just been so sweet to spend time with my husband and, not feel this huge loss, because it's not a loss for my son to go to college. It's a good thing. So
Yeah.
it's been a good season.
What's your husband's name?
His name is Jason.
Jason, way to go on the Saturday breakfast dates. Like,
I
how
know.
sweet to just like to be forward thinking. Because yeah, I feel like that is something I've heard of where people, when it becomes an empty nest because you've invested so much into your children, that one day you guys look at each other and you're just like, I don't know you. And I never want that to happen. So yes, Jason, breakfast dates for all.
Yeah, so that's been fun. It really has. And my son would get a little annoyed. I don't want to say annoyed. I don't know. He was in his feelings a little bit. He's like, you guys leave me. I'm like, everything else is about you. We're going to have this time. We need this time together. So, of course, the older he got, he understands it. Yeah. So, yeah. And it was really weird. Last week, he came home for the day on Saturday and he brought his girlfriend. This was our first time meeting. And we all went to breakfast together. So Saturday morning breakfast date looked a little different.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cute. Nikki, can you tell us a little bit about what you do, what you're passionate about?
Fun for me is I'm a homebody. So I sit on my back porch and watch TV. And that's just my thing, just to sit out by myself. I'm actually pretty much an introvert. I'm very much an introvert. So being at home is my thing, like not being in big crowds. But the funny part about that's how God works. So what do? What I've worked in student ministry for the past, I served for 5 years and was on staff for almost 5 years. So an introvert who doesn't do crowds working in student ministry where it's loud and crazy. But, I think God just gives us the grace for those things. So that's my passion, is just teens and women. So it's so beautiful how God has allowed me to work in those spaces, serve in those spaces, and where they've become where a job for me, which doesn't feel like a job. So I have worked on staff at my church in student ministry, which has stretched me in a different way. And it opened the door for me to do speaking. And that scared me to death to do that, especially as an introvert. So that is something that I've started to do now, is speaking more to teens and women. That has been the next thing, is just with women. So that is my heart, teens and women. And another organization I served with, it's called Operation Saving Life. And they help moms who were abortion minded. And when they choose life, just help walk with them with whatever, in a practical way, and relationally supporting them and all kinds of different things. And as of February of this year, I'm now on staff with that organization. So I think it's beautiful how the Lord has just given me a passion for different areas and allowed me to be able to step into them. And even if it's outside of my comfort zone in a way, because like I said, being an introvert and then also being a speaker, it's like on stage, people think you're an extrovert. I'm like, no, I go home and recharge. I'm alone and that's what I do. So that is a little bit about me. So teens and women, that's just my heart.
Well, I'd have to say that you are an excellent speaker. I loved the imagery you create when you speak, and I remember everything you said the last time we were together. So it did make an impact. I would love for you to talk a little bit about when you said, I have to lean into the spaces that God's, directing me. And even though that feels uncomfortable, were you initially like, no, I don't want to do that? Or was that like a little bit of a desire? You just like, I just don't know how.
I definitely was like, absolutely not. But if I go back and think about it, I think that the Lord had shown me these little glimpses before that I totally ignored. But I specifically remember being in our student center at church one day, and I was a volunteer and a greeter, maybe a small group leader, like not at all thinking like that. And I remember just happening to look up towards the stage, and I just felt the Holy Spirit say, you're going to be up there one day. And I have zero desire for a stage or attention. And that scared me. And I just like, I don't want that. I didn't ask for that, but that, of course, that little inkling grew. And then it became something where I was like, I don't want to get up there and just say something. I want to get up there because I have something to say. So I just remember the Lord really put putting it on me just to talk to the students about worship. That was just what he gave me. And I asked our student pastor, I was like, hey, like, can I just talk for like 5 minutes? I just feel like I need to share this. And that was just crazy, and how I can't even go. It's like a snowball into so many other opportunities. And it became a desire. That's what, when it says God gives you the desires of your heart, I really believe it's not he's genie in the bottle and gives you the desires. He plants those desires inside you. And, you know, they're planted and you water them and they grow, and it's just a beautiful thing. So it scared me, and it still does, you know, it still does, but I know I'm being obedient, and that is what I want. I have to live a life of surrender, you know?
I think that's like the biggest thing is, are we choosing to surrender our lives daily, hourly over to him? And, you know, and it is so hard, no matter if that is your passion that you're interested in, family life, friendships, work balance. I mean, everything is a constant surrender, which I believe is the name of your podcast.
Yes, that is. That's it. But that's it. I'm living it. We're all living it, you know. That's it.
All right. Well, Nikki, why don't you go ahead and share one of your parable stories with us today?
It's a little bit different, but it's just one that the Lord pressed upon my heart. And at the end of the day, say surrender. I'm just like, okay, we're going to do this. He took me back to a time I went to a conference with some friends a few years ago, and I always have 1,000 things going on. So I met my friends there. So I didn't drive there. I met them, you know, drove up separately, had been doing all kinds of other things. So I remember being pretty tired, but after the conference was over, it was a big conference, you know, over 1,000 women there. So there, they said, well, we're going to meet you back at the hotel, and we're going to grab food though. So it's like, cool, I'll just meet you there. They let me know what hotel they booked. So, and I remember just leaving the parking lot exhausted and putting that hotel in my GPS and just took off. And I don't know, I arrived at the hotel and I got there pretty quickly, and many other women from the conference began to arrive. So I'm in the hotel lobby, and I knew my friends were getting food. So all the other conference ladies are coming in. So the hotel lobby is just full, right? Yeah. I mean, there's so many women and talking and all the things. So a lot of time spent talking with other women, waiting on my friends. And as the lobby was full, then it dwindles. And it dwindles and it dwindles. And I found myself alone. And the hotel clerk noticed that I'd been there early and dwindled crowd, and I'm still there. And she just asked me, you know, if she could help me. I let her know that I was waiting on my friends, and they were just grabbing food. And, you know, I just was like, well, they might be stuck in line somewhere. It's just taking them a while. So she just said, well, what room where are they at? And they let me know, room 224. I remember it, room 224. So she just said, okay, well, if they're in that room, I'll just give you a key. You can go ahead and get up. And I was so thankful, because I'm telling you, I was just exhausted. Yeah. So happy to be able to get in the room, just get a shower and all the things. So as I said, there's been lots of time that's passed while I'm waiting on them to arrive. So I get in the room, and one of them calls me, and she says, Nikki, where are you? And I was like, well, I'm in the room. I'm waiting on you guys, you know. And she's like, well, what do you mean you're in the room? It's like, I'm in 224. What do you mean? She's like, we're in the room. We're in 224. It's like, well, how? How are you in the room? You know? So she said, are you in? And she named the hotel. I was like, yes, I'm at the same hotel. What in the world? And we realized she was in the next city over.
Oh my gosh.
And as I realized this on the phone, I'm in this room. So I walk in initially, though. I should have mentioned that. I walk in and I'm like, okay, I don't know whose bed is whose, like who's in what room. It's a big group. So I was like, well, I don't know who's in this room, but they pack weird, because who wears men's socks?
Oh my gosh.
And who plays a guitar? I didn't know anybody played. Why'd they bring their guitar? And then that's when my phone rang, actually. And we realized that I'm standing like in the middle of the room, and I turn around and the bathroom light is on, the door is closed. And at that moment, I bolt out of this room. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's some man's room. I was in some man's room, and I mean, my heart was racing. I don't even remember if the front desk lady was down. Like when I left, I just had to get out of there as soon as I could. I don't even know if I returned the key or what happened. I don't know what happened there.
They don't need it.
I just didn't want any parts of that. But, you know, I drove as fast as I could, about 20 minutes away to the next city over, you know, to the correct hotel. And I get in their room. As soon as I walk in the room, I mean, they die laughing. You know, everyone's dying of laughter. And to this day, they will not let me forget that day that I went to the wrong hotel. I was in the wrong room. And honestly, that sounds like a funny little story. It was hilarious at the time. Everyone thought it was hilarious. And while I think of it, you know, yeah, my friends thought it was hilarious. And the front desk lady thought, you know, she was being helpful.
Yeah.
I look at it and was like, that could have been horrible. That could have ended horribly. There's so many little lessons just in that I just think of them like I was in the right room, the right hotel, wrong city. And it for me and just in life, in the way that I navigate life and choices, it just reminds me that almost right is still wrong. And there's so many times that we are like, oh, well, it's kind of right. And I'm kind of doing this and kind of can make our own way, but it's not truly where God desires for us to be. So I just say that I'd go back to that night and I think about, like I said, I was so tired. Yeah. But if I'm honest, something felt a little off even when I left that parking lot. Like I felt that little tug of like, Nikki, you're not going the right way. Nikki, you need to recalculate this GPS. Nikki, there was a pause. I felt it, but I ignored it because I was like, well, I know best. I put that, they said they're in such and such hotel. That's what I put in there, not knowing it was routing me to a different location. And although the location they were going to was farther away, that's why it wasn't the first one that came up, which is another reminder, just because the closest thing doesn't mean it's the right thing, you know?
Yes.
So there's just, like I said, it's a funny little story, but there's just so many lessons that I learned. And even when I said I was just so tired, I know even for myself and my soul, man, when I'm spiritually like spent and I'm not filled up, I tend to not listen. I tend to go my own way. I tend to lead. And that's what I did in that situation was I just felt that tug and I was like, I'm tired. I'm getting there. I'm actually going to find a faster way to get there faster. I, got there faster to the wrong place, the fastest way to the wrong location. So there's just so many lessons that I learned in that. Even with that front desk worker, she was being nice. And that was great, but all nice things aren't blessings, she was trying to be nice, but man, even if she had checked the room number, she just gave me a hotel key and did not even check like whose name was on there and all the things. I was like, man, but then even the next part, I was in a stranger's room. Yeah. Like I had this key. People could have been in there. Like, I don't know, so many things, but even in that moment, God covered me. Yeah. Like his protection covered me like inside a stranger's room. And it's like so many times, even if the almost right is still wrong or we're doing our own thing and we're in the wrong place, like God doesn't leave us there. Yeah. God doesn't leave us and just like, oh, well, shame on you. You should have listened. Like he still covered me in that moment and covers all of us. So like I said, there's just so many little lessons and little moments there that I'm like, man, that was, my friends still think it's hilarious. But yeah, I just like, God really taught me so much in that.
Wow. Well, that could have definitely been made into a TV show that night in a comedy sense, but you're right. It could have easily gone to the Dateline sense as well.
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I loved how you utilized that and really thought through, because there's so many things that we happen in our life. And I love to kind of just build off of analogies of like, well, this is really showcasing some of the truths that really could apply to our life. So could you talk to me a little bit about, what you said is like something that's almost right is still wrong. Like how have you seen that either play out in your life or just when you were a part of student ministry? Like you see this over and over either in your own life or in others?
I'll put myself on blast. There's times that I can think, well, I don't know, cover things with religion. And it's like, oh, but I'm doing the right thing, or it's not the right thing to do. It's like we're still wrong in the way that maybe we try to make our own way. I guess that's it. I know situations where I've tried to manufacture the outcome, like to do these things and not let God be God. So I just think of even when you said student ministry, I'll think about my students, like how many girls have I met with that talk about their boyfriend and like, he started coming to church and I've got him coming to church, or I met him at church. I'm like, that does not, it is a great thing, but that, it can still be wrong. Like or you guys are doing some things that, that you were taught not to do, but you still pray together. Like, right, that's great. But it's like, almost right is still wrong. Like, we're still got some things to do here. So I don't know. I just think of when we manufacture situations and try to take the lead on them, and we think we're doing the right thing, but it's still the wrong.
I was definitely that girl in your high school youth group. I'm just like, he's doing good. He's coming to church. And, but also it made me think we're studying Deborah in the book of Judges right now for our women's ministry. And it's a horrific book, actually. And just kind of like the people of Israel going back and forth. And the Canaanites are like always trying to impart and give everybody all of the horrible things that they're doing. And over time, the Israelites they just kind of let a little seep in at a time. And I think I was telling the ladies the other night, in our culture right now, it's just like we're talking about manifesting and having our truth. And it's just little things like that. When we use that kind of language, it shifts our mindset off of Christ and onto something that is not. And so I think that is such a great perspective to think about. It seems right. Everyone else is saying it. And you're right. We manufacture things to make it just fit into culture when really it pushes us away to a completely different location.
And I think of the Israelites, it always says like, they did right. The people did what they thought was right in their own eyes.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when we take the lead and, refuse to be led. Because sometimes when we know we're being led, it is the longer destination. It isn't as glamorous. It isn't this. And we're like, oh, I can do this. I can make that. And God's going to bless it. It's going to be fine. Yeah. And it doesn't work.
Yeah. I liked what you said, Nikki, about something felt off. And within the last 2 years, just recognizing when I get these ideas in my head, either a good or a bad idea, or just like that sense of urgency, I'm just reminded like, oh, that's probably not me. It's probably the Holy Spirit. And giving him the credit. But when you feel like something feels off, or you're trying to really listen to what the Holy Spirit is calling you to do, whether that is in your workplace or just day-to-day stuff, how do you choose not to ignore that and really tune into that? And I know that can be different for everybody. So specifically for you.
Honestly, and I don't want it to sound like a church answer. I just really mean it. Like, I just really want to be obedient. And I just don't move. I'm like, I'm not moving unless God says move. Like, there can be things going on with my job. I've had some rough stuff recently. I'm like, I'm here until God says go. I'm here. And I just know that he's too good for me to think I can do it better than him. He loves me and he's telling me things. So that's something I tell my husband. I'm like, the Holy Spirit doesn't give bad advice. Like, he's the counselor that doesn't give bad advice. So if he's giving me a nudge, that's the way to go. So why would I not honor that? Like, if he thinks enough of me to speak to me and to want to guide me, I want to listen. I want to obey. And oftentimes we're like, oh, God didn't answer my prayer, or God doesn't speak. I'm like, he is. We just don't want to listen. And we didn't like the answer that he gave us to our prayers. So for me, I just know that I've been through too much in my life, and I'm still going through stuff, and I've just been through a lot. And I know his voice. I know what he's told me. I know what he's shown me. And I know where I could have been if it were not for him. I want to obey.
Before we started recording today, you were like, I don't know what story I'm going to share. I don't know if I have a story. And I would have to say, sometimes I think that about myself too. Like when I hear Christine Kane talk, when she talks about her childhood, or just when people have like this, not necessarily tragic, but it's just like so overwhelming. You're like, wow, like I don't have a story like that. I have all those little moments. I have all those things. I haven't been in anyone else's hotel room, but I have these stories that are relatable. So for those of us that feel like, you know what, I don't know if my story matters. I don't know if it's good enough. What encouragement would you give them, even though you felt that today?
Yes.
Like to get over that.
Man, that is so good. And I think I felt that today. And I think maybe that's why the Lord gave me that story, because I do honestly have girl trauma. There's so much. Yeah. And I think that that's it. Like, I know the Lord is like, you gave this little simple story for a reason. And I think that's it. It's because every story doesn't have to be this, oh my gosh, it was so bad. And this is so this and so big, because God is in everything. He's in the small things. So I just think that is it. Your story is not small because you don't serve a small God. And I have said this to my students before too, as just, being on stage and just speaking to them. I just said, I'm sorry that you think, or you've been conditioned to think that you have to stand up here and talk about how terrible your life was and how God did this big thing and now you're all new. Going from death to life is a miracle. You being saved is a miracle. So that alone, we don't have to have a big story to make God look bigger and better. We can look outside and look at the trees and the sun and all of that. Like, there are miracles happening all around us. Like, His glory is all around us, and He doesn't need us to make Him look better. So your story, you don't have to have trauma to be like, well, I don't want it to seem like God hasn't done anything for me and my story is small. Like, oh no. Use your story is still can be used for His glory, no matter what it is. And He doesn't only have to work in trauma. So I think that is still a testament to Him working. If you haven't gone through these certain things, like, that's still a miracle. So
helpful for me to remember. Nikki, tell me a little bit about Operation Saving Life and why that foundation, that ministry organization.
And this isn't the reason. I'll say I did find myself, I was 18 years old and with a positive pregnancy test. So I do know what it's like to be faced with different options when you have an unplanned pregnancy. That is just part of my story. But specifically with that organization, I knew that there was stuff going on at clinics, and just something was impressed upon my heart that's like, you need to be there. I need to be there for what? Like, what do you mean, Lord? What are you talking about? Because I had a mutual friend who was on Facebook, and they were going out and talking to women, and there's something in my heart that just captured it. That's like, you have to be there. And that was in August of 2015, and I ignored it until November 2015. But it was that desire. It grew and grew and grew. And it was like, girl, you have to go out there. So that is just it. Like, honestly, just that's where the Lord put on my heart to do, because I do know if you're in these dire circumstances that you feel like you can't overcome, I know what that's like. Yeah. And while I'm appreciative for any support that I had, I know what I needed in that moment. And I just think it's beautiful that God lets me be for someone else what I wish I had. Yeah. So to now be in a place where we're like, I just got off the phone with someone, we're trying to buy mom a car. I had an 8-month-old and my car died. And I was like, well, how am I supposed to buy a car when I'm 19 years old? I'm trying to go to school. I don't have money for that. So to now be able to advocate and figure out and get a mom a car. And it's not about giving a car and this big thing, but even the little things. I had a mom just tell me yesterday, she's giving birth any day now, super exciting. And she's like, will you be there with me? Will you come to the hospital with me? I'm like, yeah. Are you kidding me? So to just live life with these moms who are in crisis, and it's hard, not going to lie. It's hard. It's messy. It can feel heavy, but that's just the work that God's called me to do. So that's how I landed there.
Thank you for choosing to share that, because I mean, not everybody wants to talk about their positive pregnancy test and the challenges and the questions and the concerns that were running through your head. I can't even imagine at 18. I think it's easy for a lot of people in the church to say, yes, I'm pro-life. And I think it's one thing though to then see that in action, because I was going through some of the Instagram posts and just like having that love and care for women who are so scared, like you were at 18, to have that support and to know somebody is going to be there not only at the birth of their child and give them just, what they need when the baby is born, but 3, 4, 5 years later, you continually build relationships. And I think that is so important. It's that aftercare, really. And I love that. Anything that has just really come out of that you've seen some beautiful relationships happen?
And there's so many. The relationship, it's not always that a lot of times there are financial reasons and they're financially bankrupt, but man, a lot of times it's relationally bankrupt. Yeah. They need a friend. They need somebody. Mm-hmm. So that's why I can stand behind this organization and work for this organization, is because it's not just pro-birth, but pro-life.
Yeah.
And we help benefit the mom beyond the birth of the baby, like to know their goals and to help them with their goals. There's moms who are going to school, so being able to just help them in so many ways. So that has just been a huge, huge blessing. And I think that you're absolutely correct with the church in action. A very, very, very cool moment is when I look through and see some of the moms who we've helped in the past, who have had lots of things going on. And then, oh my gosh, the day that I was messing around in our database and just trying to learn some things and pulled up a list, I was so confused because I pulled up our donor list and I saw a couple of our moms' names. I was like, man, our list is messed up. Why are they on this list? But it's because they are now donors.
Oh,
and that it's not because, they're donors and now there's money, but man, just to know that this is an organization that helped you and that you now want to give. We didn't ask them to give, but that's what comes out is people want to serve. People want to serve. People want to give back, and to now see these moms in a place where they can do it, even if it's $10 a month. I know you got 3 babies. That $10 a month is a big deal. Yeah. So that is a beautiful circle there, is to see that happen.
Nikki, if you could go back and talk to yourself at 18 years old, when you found that positive test, what would be 1 or 2 things that you would encourage yourself that you can say, like, look at what God has done, the faithfulness that He is going to showcase to you?
There's so much. Yeah. One thing is just, you are not alone. I just wish I knew that God was with me and that I could go to Him and that I wasn't shunned from Him. The church can make you feel a certain way at 18 and pregnant, but man, that's not reflective of God and His love for me. I wish I could have accepted that. I wish I could have accepted His love and His grace and His forgiveness. So that's the biggest thing. Yeah, there were a lot of needs that I had, but that's what I really needed, was to know that I was loved by my Father.
This conversation has really been a gift. So thank you so much for sharing. We all know, please make sure you're in the correct hotel, and that you all have a story. So thank you for helping us remember that today, Nikki. If people wanted to get connected to you, how can they do that?
I have a podcast, and I have a ministry page called Constant Surrender. I also have just my personal page, Nikki Tigg, NIKKI.TIGG, Nikki Tigg or Constant Surrender. So I'm probably a little more active right now on Nikki Tigg, but you can find me on Instagram.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Nikki. We appreciate having you on the podcast today.
Appreciate it.
There was this episode on Modern Family where Phil and Claire were in completely different rooms. They were at the same hotel. And I just kept thinking about that as Nikki was sharing. But I am so grateful that it ended the way it did, and how Nikki laid out all of her insights that she got from that simple story. All of Nikki's info will be linked in the show notes at daniellezapchenk.com if you wanted to connect more with her. For those of you that want to dive into a time of reflection, here are 2 takeaway questions. Number 1, what is something in your life right now that feels almost right, but it is still wrong? Take a time to journal about that. Number 2, after we recorded, Nikki said something that I thought was really profound. She said, God works in the in-between. Let's be mindful of how God is constantly working in your life, even when it feels like the in-between, and that you can take this time, journal about how you can give Him the glory. Thank you so much for listening. My passion is really about sharing these stories, these parable stories that we all have, so we can see God in our own lives. If your church, your conference, or your event is looking for a speaker, I would love to talk with you more about that and how we can bring a little bit of the Parable Podcast to you. You can find out more information at daniellezapchenk.com. And thank you so much to my technical producer of a husband, Eric Zapchenk, for editing this podcast. That's going to do it for today. I appreciate you so much for spending time with me. Remember, your parable showcases how you will always be in the right room with God. We'll see you back again next week on the Parable Podcast.